the South African Police Service's VIP Protection Unit, they have the responsibility of protecting and transporting the president, the deputy president. We have 75 members of an executive, the biggest executive South Africa has ever seen. Ministers and deputy ministers. They also protect and transport MECs. They protect premiers, foreign dignitaries, and I think the Speaker, Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, as well as the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. But that budget is 2 billion rand. 2 billion rand used to protect what? Maybe 200 people, while the majority of South Africans have to rely on the South African Police Service on the station level. And if you are generally middle class and above, you may enjoy the benefit of private security. But Ian Cameron, he's the chairperson of Parliament's Police Portfolio Committee, says it's time to reconsider VIP protection. Ian, thanks so much for joining us. 75 members of the executive, a president, a deputy president, speaker and chairperson of the arms of Parliament, MECs and premiers. Just who should be, in your view, should require VIP protection?
Good morning, Lisa. Yeah, so I think it's important to just take one step back and say that before one can even decide that, they need to go through a threat and risk assessment process. And I think that's the big question mark at the moment, is that we see all this protection being dished out. And while there are certain individuals that I believe do or might have a certain amount of risk or threats being made to them, I don't believe that everyone necessarily needs the amount of protection that they have, or the type of protection that they have. I also think that sometimes these units could potentially be utilized additionally, whilst not busy protecting someone, to also do other kinds of police work, even if it's in the direct areas where they find themselves.
So if a premier, MEC, a deputy minister of, say, Department of Forestries, Fisheries and the Environment, if a security assessment finds, well, there is very little risk, they should not be allowed any form of VIP security.
Yeah, so the way that they would do it, they obviously go and look if there are any active threats, any specific threats being made against them. Was there any alarming or rather warning signs of any kind? But then also they would go and look at the risk of that job. So, for example, let me use the Minister of Public Works for you. If you work with a construction mafia, it would be logical that there would be a significant amount of risk, but at the same time, there would most likely be quite a few threats. So it would be understandable that you need to put certain measures in place. And so too with, for example, the Minister of Police. So we get that. I think what we also need to understand that a lot of this budget doesn't just go for politicians. A lot of the time the perception is created that it just goes for them. But there's a massive amount of traditional leadership in the country that also receive VIP protection, and many of who do not face, in my opinion, significant risk. And I must question whether the relevant threat and risk assessments were done with those individuals.
But we're a big country, Ian. A deputy minister would sometimes need to deputize for the minister. I'll use, for example, again, the DFFE. The minister is someplace, a deputy minister needs to go to Springbok, for example. They would need to be transported there. And is that transport provided within the overall VIP protection budget?
Usually it is, yes, if of course it is done by those so-called protectors or those police officers that look after them. But again, I sometimes also hear the fact that, yes, but it's policy, or we hear that it's part of a certain handbook, or, there are many ways to skin a cat, and you hear the same excuse very often. I just think we need to rethink it a little bit. Yesterday I visited the Cape Town Flying Squad, or Western Cape Flying Squad in Cape Town, and there's no doubt that there's a significant shortage of certain types of resources. And so too with 10111. And I can go through the list. So why can't we manage the funding better to improve that service delivery and then ensure that there is protection where it is really needed, if those certain high-ranking officials really do need protection?
What is the protocol when it comes to ministers or VIPs, senior political people, and protection? I have several instances seen a minister by themselves in a local supermarket. I would see ministers on weekends when they're not involved in, when they're not working, walking by themselves, even driving by themselves. What's the protocol on when the security official is with a minister?
Yeah, so look, it all depends again on the outcome of a threat and risk assessment. They would determine whether they need mobile protection, do they need static protection, is it 24/7 mobile and static protection, and that is determined according to the potential risk and obviously if there is any kind of active threat. That also needs to be redone over time. So you could imagine that you might be working on something that has some kind of a risk for, say, for example, a year's time. Over time, that risk decreases or it may increase, but they need to redo the assessment and then redetermine whether the protection is adequate or whether it is needed, and then you move on from there. I think there might be a little bit of a status symbol that has developed over the years in terms of protection, and obviously that would be the wrong reason to have protection. But yes, I mean, you would see that because some of them don't necessarily have that risk. They have specific protection for times when they have to travel, and there might be potential threats or risks during that travel.
A departmental budget is ultimately decided by committee. The budget speech that we receive from the finance minister is the suggestion, his suggestion on how money is appropriated. It is ultimately up to the committee to have a deliberation and to vote. You, as the chairperson of the portfolio committee on police, what questions are you going to be asking the Minister of Police and the Finance Minister on what justifies a 2 billion rand VIP protection budget?
We have actually scrutinized it quite a bit last year already, and we'll continue to do so. I think what we've increased it to, or what we've started to do more, is to compare that kind of budget to what we see, for example, with regards to the lack of detectives in the country, and making sure that we capacitate them on station level and at other more specialized units, throughout the country, or divisions throughout the country. I think the comparison that we will make and the discussion that we will have with the minister will likely come quite a bit from our oversight sessions and oversight visits too. Unfortunately, a lot of the time that we get certain presentations from police management, it is presented in a way that almost creates the impression like something is 100% on ground level. But the reality on the ground to the community and the reality on the ground to that police members fighting the fight differs from that. So we'll be using our time on the ground to actually then take the discussion to the minister.
Ian Camera, he is the chairperson of the Parliamentary Committee on Police.